Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Virtual Industry Pro Summit Week, week 2 and day 8 out of 10. We're almost there. Every day we have been having experts talk about the future of esports, from economics to journalism of esports. Today's topic is data science. I'm Shaz Nasser, a digital advisor for Microsoft, and your MC for today. A major thank you for all the partners out there, Microsoft and Games for Change for planning, HyperX for the sponsorship. Make sure you look down below for the links for your discounts, and Greenlit for the production effort. Of course, none of this is possible without the City of Syracuse and the University of Syracuse for bringing this all together. Now remember, there's an EGF esports tournament happening right now. 41 teams are fighting for Rocket League greatness. Make sure you check them out on their Mixer channel to watch the tournament every day at 5 p.m. They're almost there to the finals. Now we have Greg Topo, that will be our main moderator for today, and he'll kickstart this whole program talking about the data science in the world of esports.
Thanks, Shaz. Good to see you again. Good to see the whole panel today. We are in day 8. Is that right?
We are indeed, yes.
So that means if 80% of life is showing up, I think we've done it. We everything else is gravy. So we have a great panel today. It's actually a little bit of a smaller panel for really, really interesting people that I'm dying to kind of get to know and hear from them. I'm going to keep this very short. I'm just going to start asking them to go sort of round robin and introduce themselves. Just give us kind of a very quick rundown, sort of who you are and what you do. Why don't we start with Alice?
Hi, great. Yeah, I'm Alice Woolard. I'm out in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a toxicologist, so I do computational biology for the Department of Defense by day. And on the side, I do video game analytics for Greenlit, which is a marketing company.
Wow. And so you don't get many toxicologists who do video game analytics. Can you talk about how those two, no pun intended, how those two mix?
Yes, that's a good question. So all of my education and background's in biology and toxicology, but as everyone who's done research science knows, there's so much statistics involved in research science. And I actually got into data science when I was working at the Environmental Protection Agency. I worked in a toxicology lab full of toxicologists that didn't really understand statistics, people who couldn't even use Excel, really. So I took it upon myself to pretty much become the statistician of the lab group, and on the job learned R, Python, how to pipeline data, things like that. And it got me really excited about big data, data mining. And I was able to transfer those skills into this industry. So when people outside of my field recognized I have a certain skill set, they'll say, oh, you can apply that to this data. So it's the same sort of work you're going to do.
And I'm glad that somebody is applying data to the EPA. That really just, thank you for your service. Let's go to Dustin.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Dustin Ryan. I'm a data platform architect at Microsoft. So I've been at Microsoft for about 5 years now, and I work with our customers in the education industry basically to help them be successful with Microsoft Data Platform Technologies. So I come from a little bit of a different background than data science. I first started with data warehousing and building scalable BI architectures for customers across a really wide variety of industries. But now I'm very fortunate that I get to sort of play in that space with our customers that are on the education side. So I have been really excited to be engaged with Syracuse University and helping them do some cool things. And even recently helping run the data workshop for some of the SU students on using some of our technologies to analyze some very cool data sets related to Rocket League.
Nice. And where are you calling from?
I'm located just outside Jacksonville in Northeast Florida.
And you're in a beautiful brand new home, I can see.
Yeah, that's what the background says.
Data analytics pays really well, I can tell. Great, thanks, Dustin. Donald, you're next.
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name's Donald Brinkman. I lead the esports and video game team over here at Microsoft. My team we were responsible maybe about 3 years ago for being the first to bring structured data search experiences to search engine on Bing. And since then, we've been investing a lot in just figuring out ways that we can pull all this data, all this fragmented data in esports together into one place, apply machine learning, machine vision to it, and just drive insights and power great experiences for people.
And where are you coming from?
I'm in Seattle, Washington.
Okay. Fabulous. And,
although it's now, these esports arenas, it's really cheap rental. You can
I can tell.
Yeah, it's really nice.
That's like it's your kitchen behind you, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
You get little side projects when you get stuck at home a lot.
I like the lighting. You clearly put a lot of effort into that.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Donald. And Remy, last but not least.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Remy Cross. I am talking to you all from Orange County, California, where I work at the Connected Learning Lab, which is a research unit at the University of California, Irvine, housed in the Donald Brin School of Engineering. And if that's a lot of acronyms and stuff, don't worry. Okay. We deal with it all day. And I actually am a research manager who works on a variety of projects, including our esports initiatives, where we look at the intersection of esports and learning, in particular academic esports in the K through 12 environment, as well as collegiate esports. And we're really interested in sort of gathering data and then applying the insights to how esports might help motivate certain types of learners, what type of learning can come from esports, as well as sort of wider questions around diversity and inclusion in esports and how to sort of address those and what that looks like. And I know, I think Alice talked about some of the techniques that she has brought to this. And I'd say we do a lot of the statistical analysis, but we also do qualitative work as well. And we kind of run the gamut of the toolbox to look at what is going on with esports, which can be very exciting, but also very challenging.
Fabulous. And I've been a bad host because I forgot to ask everybody what game you're playing in quarantine. So actually, let's kind of go backwards. So we'll start with Remy and go backwards. Remy, what are you playing?
I mean, clearly, Minecraft.
Okay.
Minecraft, but
you're taking it a bit too seriously, by the way.
Yeah, I'm very, very immersed. As of this morning, Hungry Hippos with my kids. But personally, I've been playing some Teamfight Tactics. Because I had one of our researchers was talking about it and posed sort of an interesting question for data gathering, and I've been looking at that. So
nice. Okay, fabulous. Donald, what about you?
Oh gosh, what am I not playing? So I have been trying to finish God of War finally. Now that I have a little more time, but also a lot of virtual events with folks playing Scribble.io. And some Jackbox games, of course, playing Risk of Rain 2, a little bit of Lords of Waterdeep, and I run a weekly D&D session as well, just on Roll20.
So is God of War like the War and Peace of games? It's like, you know, the game you play when you're stuck inside.
Yeah, it's a little more intimate. It's a story of a boy and his father killing a lot of things.
All right, sounds good. Dustin, what about you?
Right now, I am playing the heck out of Call of Duty Warzone.
Nice.
I am just burning up my Xbox with Warzone, but I'm also playing a lot of Age of Empires 3, the new definitive edition. I grew up playing Age of Empires all through grade school, and that is one of my all-time favorite games. So I'm really excited that they got the new definitive editions that are coming out. They're super awesome.
Very cool. Okay, Alice.
So my WoW PvP partner is really mad at me. I've completely put aside all my other games to focus on
Okay.
Animal Crossing. Right? Have to have the best town possible.
But you and the rest of the world, right? Now, were you playing Animal Crossing before this all began, or did this just happen?
I guess honestly, the last time I played was on GameCube. So what was that?
Oh, okay.
15 years ago?
Okay. Yeah, so I'd say slightly before this all started.
Mhm.
Very nice. Great. Well, thank you, folks. And just to everybody who's watching from afar, we are going to, if you like to, answer your questions. So just make sure you post them on Mixer, and eventually Shaz will get to them and feed them to us. So don't forget, Mixer is where you want to post your question. And by the way, I say this when I do all these panels, you know, please tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself if you can, and please make it a question. We'd be happy to answer it. You can ask one panelist specifically, or you can just ask the whole panel. We're here for you. And to the panel, you guys, 4 of you, you to know and that we're going to try to keep this as sort of open and free a conversation as possible. I always tell people I like this to be brunch without the bottomless Bloody Marys, but since you're all sitting at home, drink up. Nobody's watching. You know, it strikes me that just to kind of get the conversation rolling, it strikes me that that the subject we're talking about today is sort of inevitable in that games themselves, you know, they are built from data, right? They are built from decisions that people make. They are built from you know, the sort of the stored data of people sort of encountering these systems. And I guess I wonder, just sort of, somebody want to start the conversation off with sort of like, when did it occur to you? Was it a certain game? Was it a certain experience you had with a game? Was there some research you saw? Like, when did it occur to you that games and data analytics sort of play well together? They go together. When did this become something that you got interested in? And I'll just, and whoever wants to kind of start, really up to you. Just go like this, and we'll hear from you. Yeah, go for it.
Sure, I can talk a little bit about sort of the baby steps that I saw doing sort of computer RPGs back in the like mid to late 90s, where it became clear that you're dealing with a lot of sort of hidden variables. And I think a lot of people who play CRPGs have this experience where they want to get the best loot. They want to sort of figure out where the best encounters are. And that really means sort of either doing it yourself or poking around and finding somebody else who's kind of looked at those things and really crunched the numbers to provide sort of that optimal play experience. And I think a lot of the researchers I talk to often come in because they have sort of an interest in that sort of optimal play experience, and that is really a data-driven sort of quest. And then I'd say where it really exploded for me was playing World of Warcraft and being part of a very competitive raid guild. And some of you are nodding, you're probably familiar with World of Warcraft. And if you've ever been in a competitive raid guild, you know that it's almost a full-time job outside of the game, where you're having to analyze, you know, who's pulling their weight in terms of heals and DPS and all these other variables. really, the more data savvy you are, the more competent you are at being able to parse that, gather that data, parse it, and then feed it back in a way that your guildmates can understand, the more successful you are in a lot of aspects of the game.
How about others?
I'm glad Remy brought that up. I was thinking the same thing. I have a very funny personal story about that. In high school, I was in a WoW guild with my boyfriend at the time, and my DPS was so low that my own boyfriend kicked me out of a raid. It was a traumatic experience. So obviously, like Remy pointed out, I just spent all this time trying to maximize it, get better, figure out what I was doing wrong, what I could do right. So I did.
Wait, you didn't just leave him at that very moment?
Oh no, I did after my DPS was higher than his.
All right, good. Just to clear that up. All right, thank you. Sorry, continue.
Well, but that's a good point. That is something that got me initially interested in maximizing what you can get out of a game. And I mean, I still do that in WoW PvP now, but well, I used to. Animal Crossing took my time. Now I apply Bayesian statistic models to the stock market on Animal Crossing. That's what I do in my free time. But an actual like stat thing that did get me into video games from a broader marketing perspective was trying to figure out how many women were involved in games, because like there's all these stereotypes, and I think it's gotten a lot better now. I think people are more chill with it now. And someone here might know a more recent stat, but isn't it something about 46% of gamers are women?
Yeah, I think ESA says might even be more than that actually.
Yeah, so learning things like that and better understanding the true demographic of everyone playing games, and seeing how maybe marketing companies or gaming companies aren't even advertising to their entire population.
Neat. Okay. So wait, so how is your significant other still on you about your gaming stats?
Oh no, he's long gone.
No, I mean your current. Would you have a current one who's okay with your stats now?
My current partner does more of first-person shooter games. She streams first-person shooter games, and I'm really bad at them, and I feel bad about it, and I'm a perfectionist, so I don't do things that I'm bad at.
I think that's smart. It's the way to go. Okay. Donald or Dustin, you have any thoughts on this kind of opening question?
Yeah. I first started really thinking about like kind of the data aspect of gaming. This was actually long before I was involved in any sort of professional capacity, working with data or anything like that. I was playing in some sort of amateur but competitive tournaments. I mentioned Age of Empires earlier, and I remember I was playing in this one tournament, and Age of Empires is a prolific real-time strategy game, and playing on Microsoft Gaming Zones. That was back in the day, and I came in second place in this tournament, and it just really upset me because I was like right there. I was right there to like winning the whole thing, and I came in second place in this tournament, and so I started going back and thinking about, well, how can I actually improve some of these times, like transitioning between the different ages and upgrading your economy and your army and all these things. And I started, documenting the times between the ages, and so, okay, can I improve this if I go to like a 10 villager build or an 11 villager build, or what if I play with this civilization? Started, really documenting these things, and it was, at the time I was just, tracking things in like spreadsheets and Excel and Word, and just doing my best to try to maximize that. And that was when I started really thinking about, if I can actually put some kind of quantitative numbers around what I'm doing in this game, maybe I can really find where I can actually shave, seconds off, which can be the difference between winning or losing a game. And it started to really kind of, I realized the potential to being able to effectively leverage data in a real way. And it was really, really kind of groundbreaking for me. And it did help me improve my game and get better. Although I can never go back and re-win that tournament. I still wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat thinking about it today.
Yeah, but it got you that cool house, so I think everything's good.
Exactly.
But it's interesting because what all you're all saying, and I'm dying to hear from Donald as well. But what you're all saying is kind of like it sort of you're scratching this sort of what if itch, right? Like, what if I just change one thing? What if I just do this one thing? Which is to me the kind of the great underappreciated question in games, right? Every gamer who ever spent more than 20 minutes with a console or a a smartphone. That's the question they're asking, right? Like, what if, how can I just, maximize or make this one thing better? Which I think is really kind of a cool place to start for anybody. Donald, do you have any thoughts on any of this?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll
Okay.
repeat some of the same.
Yeah.
But I guess for me, I mean, it's hard to pin down, but definitely Magic the Gathering was
Okay.
something that made me really realize the subtleties and the min-maxing and having 4 of a card in your deck versus 3 of a card, and coming to understand like Richard Garfield's background as a mathematician and just what he put into it in terms of formality, and then later. Maybe about 8 years ago, when I was leading Games for Learning initiatives at Microsoft Research, I actually had a few chances to actually to meet with Richard and try to kind of stir up trouble with him. He's a Seattle native, and amazing conversations, and
Nice.
through that came to understand just like the way that like little kids playing Pokemon card game, the amount of statistics that they have to learn and the innate nature of mathematics that comes through in complex systems thinking really got me thinking about the benefits that games could provide, cardboard and electronic games. And that was a time when we were looking at like the Kinect sensor had come out at that point, and we started looking at ways that we could apply it to helping college football athletes like improve their kicking skills, and it's strange how it's all come back around, because the way that esports works, it's now everything is mediated through this digital layer. So many of the things that were very difficult to track. For example, with traditional football, putting GPS sensors on shoulder pads of athletes and all this crazy stuff we had to do to get things to work. Suddenly, we have a much easier way to collect much more data. But ironically, we've now started doing things with machine vision. So rather than try to get inside the code, which is actually really hard, we're once again outside and observing it, just in a much more efficient way.
And what are, like, when you talk about watching people play video games at scale, like, what are some of the questions you're asking, and what are some of the answers starting to look like?
So there's a lot of different ways to go after it. Some of them clearly we want to provide value to people. We can produce all kinds of interesting things, and we can say that the number of Rocket League boosts were enough to get us to Alpha Centauri and back. But like who really cares ultimately? So looking at things like helping players to just improve their game. Understanding things like 0-day patch analysis, for example. A lot of times when a patch comes out in a game like League of Legends, it may take days or even weeks for people to really understand if a champion has less speed but more attack power. What does that mean, and how does it work with the synergies? And so if we can look at the behavior at scale, we can perhaps provide these insights more quickly to people. Now, with something like League of Legends, they have a fairly well-structured API, although it only gives you like 60-second fidelity, and so you don't necessarily have. So what we can do now, though, is we can provide higher fidelity. We can track anything we want, and also for games that simply don't have APIs, or thinking about retro titles, like where's the big data around the World Tetris tournament? We can't get that because there's just those teams don't exist anymore. So like that kind of analysis is important, and also just ways that we can help connect people to content that they really love. I think the current state of the streaming ecosystem is just not really helpful to viewers in a lot of ways. If you search for a streamer, you can search by title, and then you basically get search results that are ranked by their number of viewers or their number of subscribers. Right. So we're creating these centers of gravity, which are creating these super celebrities, which are wonderful for the ecosystem as a whole, but it does not help the viewers to find new content that they can that they want, and it doesn't help emerging streamers to be able to be discovered.
So just quickly, because I want to give as many people a chance to kind of think and talk about this as possible. So what are some of the indicators that you're using instead of, okay, this person has the most viewers. What are the alternative ways to look at success in the streaming world or in the esports world?
So it's really anything that you could watch by watching the game. We can find it, given enough time and effort. But we can do it in parallel against tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of streams simultaneously. So what character they're playing, how many eliminations they have in the current game, how close are the scores in the game, what maps they're playing, where they are on the map, where they tend to go on the map, if there's particular neighborhoods that you are interested in watching. All these things are available to us. And I do want to I won't dwell on it, but the last thing I want to call it is health of gamers, I think is really important, that we can look at things and we can kind of understand, and we're starting to look at ways that we can help people understand if maybe their performance is lagging, they need to take a break, ways that we can help people to sort of balance, healthy habits against gaming as well.
I wanted to kind of ask Remy something just based on something I think that we might have glossed over, but you're a sociologist.
Yes. Yep.
So when a sociologist hears what you just heard, would Donald talk about, like, what questions do you have? What are the synapses that are firing for you? And are there some is there some interlapping here?
I mean, so many things, right? I've been taking notes. So what Donald just said, there's a lot of things. I was like, oh, that's good. I mean, the idea of what he was talking about with like the 0-day patch and what we're really talking about is the metagame in a lot of these games. And then the metagame, I think, is inherently data driven, right? You can't understand the metagame without understanding data. And so
before you say it, for people who might not know, talk about what a metagame is.
Oh boy. So the metagame is basically and if anyone else wants to chime in, but I think we might define it as sort of the collection of optimal play strategies that lead you to kind of your desired end game state. There's some sociology for you, right? Very, very academic, but basically it's what do you need to do to win? Or succeed in the game, or for whatever your optimal strategy is, right? If you want to level fast in an RPG, or you want to rise in rank in a competitive team shooter, right? So to understand that, you have to understand the underlying mechanics of the game and how they change from time point to time point as the game balances. And I know Donald mentioned tabletop role playing, which is much more static, right? D&D doesn't update itself every couple of weeks, right?
Sure.
It updates editions every 8 to 10 years. So you can find a stable sort of play style there that holds constant over time, but most of your major titles, they change rapidly. And when that happens, you have to be able to adapt. And the people who understand sort of the underlying data that goes into changing those things and what that means and how that plays out are the ones who are often better positioned to take advantage of it. And then the other thing I'd sort of highlight is sort of what we like to talk about in the lab, and is in the name of the lab, which is this idea of connected learning, which is really taking technology in all its glory as well as its potential problems, and understanding how that is changing the way not just children but everyone learns, and the potential to use technology, particularly interest-based technologies like games, to meet young people often where they are, right? We keep talking about stats and data and these things, and I occasionally interact with teenagers, and I can tell you, if you start talking about stats to teenagers, most of them are going to do whatever they can to get out of the room. But if you start talking about League, or you start talking about Overwatch, or you start talking about Animal Crossing or other games that they're into, and use that as a way to talk about stats, talk about data, talk about analytics, then they're much more receptive to those arguments, right? You can't, it's just the abstract, like, you need to learn stats because you need to learn stats, doesn't go very far. But if you want to get good at League, you need to understand XYZ matrix, that then becomes a much more persuasive argument for investing time, investing effort, and allows for educators and parents oftentimes to find a way, find a lever to really open up learning for students and kids who may have been resistant towards it when it's not linked to sort of their interests.
Mm-hmm. You know, I want to kind of follow up on that and just sort of move the question towards esports specifically. We've been talking about a lot of different titles, a lot of different eras. We are now, you know, for the past couple of years, in a much different place. Esports seem to just be sort of taking games to a whole different destination, and I wonder, this is open to anybody. I wonder if is there something that esports does for this field that gaming prior to this has not been able to do, whether it's you know, a critical mass of players, whether it's just much more data about individual decisions or players or teams or titles. What are some of the things that are happening now that are sort of breaking this field open in terms of esports?
I'm trying. I guess. So you mean what are the the cultural things that are happening that are breaking this open, like
No,
making it's relevant now?
No, I guess maybe the question I'm thinking of is more like, do esports have sort of a bigger density of data available to folks like you, to sort of, you know, crack open and think about, like,
Than traditional games?
and traditional games, you know, yeah, I mean, than traditional and sort of the field up till now.
Yeah, I don't know, because I mean, I guess, and WoW's a good example because it is an esport. But you know, the whole MMORPG area is, I mean, just rife with data. It's so stat heavy, and it's always been there. I think it just now it's tickling like the same kind of impulses that came from traditional sports. You get lots of data geeks in traditional sports, and now when people are thinking about, you know, you're starting to see fantasy sports starting to emerge, and you know, it's just people love to get this information. It gives them things to talk about. I think one of the big things that's very unique about this relative to traditional sports is the level of engagement. I mean, if you were to look at the numbers of NFL fans that actually play football, it's not very big, you know. And it's like now we have a situation. Imagine if after a Seahawks game, if the stadium emptied out and all the sports bars emptied out and everyone went running to their local municipal field to play with each other, it's like no longer are you just passively observing this. Like, you want to understand how to play better. You may have aspirations to become, you know, an amateur athlete or a professional athlete. With new games coming online, I mean, look at, like, there's already pro teams spinning up around Valorant. Like the most experienced Valorant player in the world has what, 15 days of experience? I mean, this is it's insane. It's completely insane, and it's exciting because it's like being around, you know, when baseball in the end, you know, the end of the 19th century, but with all the craziness, but knowing where it can go and having all these tools available to us to actually do really interesting things with it.
It's interesting. I love the idea of sort of democratizing it, because, you know, you might be the best player in the world, but you only have a 15-day head start on me, right?
Absolutely, and just in terms of democratizing access, I mean, just if you watch the NBA 2K drafts, like the people who are getting up on stage, this is not a bunch of 6'8" muscle-bound athletes. You know, there was a wide variety of people coming forward, and the level of access and that we have now, there's still a lot of problems with diversity and equity in this space, but it does not have to be that way.
Sure.
So I can talk a little bit from the data that we have that's come out of the NASEF high school leagues, and I think in terms of why esports now, there's a number of factors, and as a sociologist, I'd say one of them is that what Donald was just talking to. There's not a lot of field stability, right? We
Mhm.
know, and we've known for a long time what it takes to get into a professional sports league, but for esports, not only have they not been around long enough for that field to solidify around what is and is not required to a point where some people may get locked out, but it's also changing much more than traditional sports.
Mhm.
The other thing that we've sort of seen at least a little bit is you now have a critical mass of people who grew up playing computer games in schools teaching. So one of the things that NASEF does is they have general managers that are teachers, educators that sponsor the club. And so 20, 30 years ago, when I was in high school, finding somebody who was a gamer that was a teacher, forget about it, right?
Sure.
Now almost all of the people who are educators now have grown up with Nintendo or
Mhm.
Sega or Xbox, right? So they have a frame for this. They have an interest in it. They understand how meaningful that was to them growing up.
Mhm.
The other thing I'd say that we see in some of the data is that for these kids that participate in esports in the middle school and high school years, it's about inclusion. These are kids who previously, in a lot of instances, may not have seen their interests reflected in school, right? If, they're not to the point of, the 6'8" physical specimen who, is really good at basketball, but they can look at streams on Twitch and they can see people who often look like them playing these games and say, hey, I can do that. And this circles back around again to the importance of diversity and inclusion here as well, because right now the faces that they see are limited, but they don't have to be. And I think one of the things that we've been really interested in seeing is how esports clubs open up their opportunities to a more diverse and wider audience, and what sort of activities they can offer to them to bring in players who may not just be that traditional kind of streamer who is very high performing in the thing, but are able to do other sorts of esports related activities, whether that's content creation or shoutcasting or other forms of creative endeavor. And so it is not just democratized around participation in the actual game itself, but we see the data seems to suggest that we have a lot of kids interested who come into it to do all kinds of other things around interest. I mean, one of the more successful events that we've seen NASEF put on that gets a large numbers is fan art and cosplay sort of events,
Yeah.
right? And these are intrinsically linked to esports. I mean,
Sure.
League has a huge fan art and cosplay scene around it. And these are other ways, of people to feel welcome and feel like they're participating in this. And we're starting to see now data that supports this and shows that there's a lot of different ways for people to participate and feel included
Yeah.
in this sort of activity.
Nice. To your point about sort of generations of people playing games, growing up playing games, I was amazed when I was working on my book. I ended up scoring an interview with one of the creators of Oregon Trail, and it was three young teachers in Minneapolis who basically turned a board game into a electronic game, and the first students to play it in school was in a Minneapolis junior high school. Was 1971, the December of 1971. So these kids are now, fast forward almost 50 years, these young people who basically played the first sort of educational video game, if you will, are now in their early 60s. So it goes a little farther back than we think. By the way, if people want to get that data you were just talking about, where would they find it?
So we have some of that data is put out through NASEF, that's North American Scholastic Esports Federation. So they basically gave us a grant to study their league. And
Gotcha.
so we turned the data over to them. But then the Connected Learning Lab and the Connected Learning Alliance also publishes reports through the CLA, Connected Learning Alliance website. And you can go there and we have reports on learning with Minecraft and Lego and all sorts of Pokemon, all sorts of different pop culture and game related content, and how educators and parents and students can use that to sort of enhance their learning. And all of
Nice.
that is, very data driven.
Nice. Hey, I want to switch gears a little bit. Ask Dustin a question about your work at Syracuse. Can you talk a little bit about the work you're doing with students there?
Yeah, sure, Greg. So just this past week, we held a really exciting workshop focused on leveraging some really cool data sets around Rocket League, players and game statistics, and how those players perform in the games. And so we had a series of game stats for these players, and we worked with students in their sports analytics program, and also some students from their iSchool. And really the goal of the workshop was to show them some of the technologies that Microsoft is developing, and how it can help them use some of these data sets. And so we had a 2-day workshop, a couple of hours on each day, and then we worked with the students beforehand and afterhand to answer the questions about some of the tooling and things that we're doing around that. The stuff that the students produced, I don't know what I was really expecting, but it blew me away. It's not like I was expecting very little of them. I wasn't sure what to expect, and the stuff that they just did was phenomenal. They did some really cool things, and I think there'll probably be some opportunities later on to continue to do some work with these students. But taking the data, building a relevant data model around that, and producing a format that they can then very quickly and easily interact with the data and ask questions around the data. So we did the 2-day workshop, and they're going to be presenting their work here over the next couple of days. I'm really excited to see some of the cool things that they're doing. But working with students, to kind of piggyback onto one of the earlier questions, esports is sort of this brave new world, and it's I don't think it's anywhere close to kind of the peak of where it's going to go, as far as mainstream adoption and becoming more mainstream. I think there's a lot of room for it to continue to grow, and I'm excited to see that. But it's interesting, no offense to anybody on this call, but I don't think anybody on this call has a future in the NFL or the NBA, right? We don't have a shot at doing that, but any of us could become, esports professionals, right? If we wanted to, right? We could take the game that we felt most comfortable with. We could take the game that we're most passionate or excited about and continue to excel at that. And not only that, I could then, have the opportunity to participate with the other top gamers in the world, right? I'm not going to go get to play with pro NFL players. I don't have any opportunity to do that, but I do have the opportunity to participate and play with the pro esports players, the best people in the world, and learn from them. And Remy, you were talking about the meta game and being able to not just understand the mechanics of a game, but what are these specific mechanics and things that help you win? What are the things that you can do? And so this world of esports, I think, is creating this whole new crowd of folks that maybe they don't quite realize it yet, but they're becoming data professionals, right? They're becoming folks that are interested in data when they start analyzing. I'm playing Call of Duty Warzone right now, and you're analyzing time to kill with these specific guns and what attachments help you improve your aim down sight speed, and what's the best strategy. Should I run more? Should I stand? Should I camp more? What does that look like? And so you have these folks that are really invested in esports and enjoy it, but now they're slowly becoming folks that are interested in using data to improve their game.
Cool.
I have a question actually for Alice related to this, and because your day job is not in gaming, but I wonder about this. Did anything about gaming lead you to want to pursue data science, or was it the data science that made you start to see this potential in gaming, or how did those things?
Yeah, it's the second one, more so. I actually didn't know there was a career in this field until a few years ago. I wasn't aware, because it seemed as though the esports community blew up overnight into something my parents knew about, or people who didn't play video games knew about. But yeah, that's a good question. I just sort of knew about this, and an opportunity came up, and it was very exciting.
Mhm.
And I really love doing this. Something Dustin pointed out that I thought was interesting, and also Remy sort of touched on this, the types of new data we have coming out, and regular gamers trying to analyze it and whatnot. Even at the marketing side, this is something really interesting that's come up from friends, is trying to understand the most popular game right now, because you'll have rudimentary stats like who's got the most views on Twitch, right?
Yeah.
And then, right, and then like everyone here is like, no, there's something deeper than that, like that's, and trying to
Right.
figure out. And so my friends who aren't data science professionals hate stats, did whatever they could to place out of it. They're still trying to figure out like what information can I pull that makes this game actually most popular.
Really interesting. And just to stick with you, if you don't mind, like you're about to enter a PhD program in bioinformatics, correct? Like,
Yes.
Can you? I mean, obviously, you're at the start of it, not at the end of it. Like, do you envision games being part of it as your PhD studies develop? Or, I mean, is there already something that you've got sort of locked in?
Well, I'm trying to do a best of both worlds thing. We'll see how it works. I'd like to balance both careers. We'll see how it goes, but I definitely do, once I finish that program, stay in video game analytics, and stick with all this because it makes me happy and it's fun to do.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is something, I think this is part of the potential here. Remy had mentioned, this is a gateway to get kids excited about statistics. And my dream is to have, high school statistics classes where kids play 10 minutes of Rocket League and then spend the remaining 40 minutes going through their data. But I think, like with things like game development or game design, you think like, well, if you don't get that, you have nothing left. But the beautiful thing about data is that data is just beautiful. And that's like, if this gets kids hooked on data, I'm very pleased that I get to work with game data, but for me, like conversational linguistic data, working near Bing with search engine data, like at scale, I mean, it is the most fascinating. I feel like the luckiest person in the world, and the opportunity this has, it's great. Like if you want to be an esports athlete, go for it, but not everyone can. I mean, go be a data scientist and then keep playing video games, and it'll make you better at video games, and you'll like have a great career.
Yeah. So I want to just interrupt real quickly just to make sure it's quarter of, a little after, that Shaz, I don't know if you can hear us. Do we have any questions from
Yes, we
the audience?
do. We do indeed.
Fabulous.
One question.
Let's hear a couple. Do you want to ask just one at a time and get answers, or do you want to ask?
Sure. I mean, we just have one great one right now. I can ask.
Go for it.
Do each of you have a game that has the most interesting data sets? So to paraphrase, I guess, which game that you have in the data sets, so which one is the most interesting that you're looking at?
Good question. I'll start with Alice. Put you on the spot.
Okay. I don't have an answer professionally, because the data I work with is more marketing of video games and not specifically games themselves. All of my answers would just fall back to what we talked about earlier of growing up and trying to get the best DPS or the best turnip prices in Animal Crossing right now.
Well, turnip prices in Animal Crossing is a pretty big deal at the moment.
It is, yeah. So a lot of people are trying to get different models, pulled out the API for Animal Crossing and try to data mine it. A lot of the early models failed because of the type of stats people were applying. So it's almost turned into this Bayesian versus frequentist stats debate, which is a whole other thing. That's fun to get into.
Absolutely. Remy, how about you?
So we are mostly dealing with League and Overwatch data currently, and in terms of what sort of interesting data we get, we have a GSR, a grad student researcher, who's looking at issues around tilt, which is a term I think a lot of people who do esports are probably familiar with, this idea of getting upset to the point where it affects your gameplay. And she's doing a lot of work around what gets people tilted, how they understand that, what their responses are, and then how it affects their gameplay, which I think is really fascinating around some of these some of the negative stereotypes that often emerge about esports and how to potentially address those. So it's, you know, I keep coming back to her and being like, this is great data. I love this data because it's really interesting in terms of what these middle school and high school students are telling us about what it looks like when they get upset and the sorts of things that trigger them to becoming upset when they're playing League or when they're playing Overwatch. So
can I just dig into that a little bit? When you say the things that make them upset, is it happens in the game or like is it always the same kind of thing?
It's very preliminary data. She's just starting to analyze it right now, and she's actually developing the typology. But the short answer is no. There's a lot of different things that can happen. So it can be connection issues, right? It can be the game, the way the game is playing. It can be other players. It can be the fact that they just recognize that they're having a bad day. And so that's part of it. But then the other thing is, what do they do, right? And you have responses like, I throw my keyboard, right? I turn the computer off. I troll my teammates, right? So sometimes it's internal. And then sometimes they take the negativity that they're experiencing and they try to throw it back at people.
Gotcha.
And so I think that provides some interesting insights. And then how do we, you know, categorize this, look at these responses, and then use that to potentially develop better insights into creating healthier and more enjoyable game experiences for, you know, players, teams, and communities.
I know that, and as you were talking earlier, I was thinking, you know, one of my early experiences with this, and very preliminary, maybe going back 10 years now, was maybe Donald, you were part of this. I remember I was really interested in the occasion of players getting very upset with Halo because they were everybody was dying at certain spots in the game, and when Bungie went and looked at it, they realized that, you know, this is not an idle complaint. You know, this is a real. I mean, I don't know if you call it a fault in the game, but it was a thing happening to just about everybody. So they ended up tweaking that level. But my sense is that it was one of the first times that there was feedback from the players to the developers.
Oh, I could tell stories, but I mean, it was the birth of quantitative game analytics happened around that time, and it was some very smart folks at Microsoft who brought in experimental psychologists to lead their user research and QA groups.
Yeah.
And it changed the culture, and I think it changed culture not just here but throughout the industry.
Nice. And I got us off track a little bit to Shaza's question about games that have the sort of the richest data. You want to tackle that, Donald?
Yeah, I mean, League of Legends is the gold standard. Riot's been such a wonderful company for just providing data to its community. So it's built this wonderful ecosystem around it. So there's so much we can do there. You know, we love it. We love working with Cloud9 and helping, you know, provide them with interesting data and analytics based on it. Very competitive though. Rocket League, I love Rocket Leagues, and I'm sure Dustin can speak to it. So I won't take time on that. But I'd say for me right now, the most interesting game for data is Valorant, because there's no data unless you have machine vision. And although you're seeing very quickly, there's already go look, and you'll find there's some interesting tools that are being developed now. I'm sure Riot will have an API around this, but right now it's a very special feeling when you know sort of who the best Valorant players are out there before anybody else does.
I had a quick question for Remy. What was the age group or general demographics of the people you were serving for anger and whatnot?
So the NASAF leagues run from middle school to high school, but most of the players that we're dealing with are, I'd say, lower end. We have a handful of grade 8, and then mostly are clustered around grades 10, 11, 12. 8, 9 a little bit, but then, and these are kids that are participating in a structured league at their school, and then they agree, so they volunteer to fill out survey data or be interviewed.
Nice. And I didn't want to let Dustin get lost in this question. about the game with the richest data?
If I had to just pick one, I think that would be really, really difficult to just say like, hey, this is my favorite data set. I got into working with data because I was intrigued by the data. To me, it seemed like this, like you're digging for treasure, right? So you've got this vast data set and you're trying to unlock the insights to help you answer these questions that maybe you have, but even potentially answer questions that you didn't know that you could even ask, or you had never thought to ask because of the scale of the data set or the tools, or whatever the reason happened to be. One of the games that I played when I was in grade school was the Counter-Strike mod for Half-Life. I played a ton of Counter-Strike, and I remember logging into the servers and looking at, okay, what are the kill stats? Who are the top killers with the different weapons, and what are the heat maps look like on the maps? And these are obvious ambush points. And I always thought that was really interesting, that you could go that deep in the data and find out where do players sort of lose their gun battles the most, or win their gun battles the most. And then and recently working with the SU students on the Rocket League data, I mean, that's a pretty robust data set. It's very rich, and you can and you can, there's a lot of things that are in that data set. And I'm not a Rocket League player, but I do find the data itself very, very interesting, especially as these students that I'm working with are playing Rocket League, and I'm listening to them sort of think over the data and mull it over, and we're looking at the insights, and they're thinking, okay, well, maybe if we do this, it looks like if you hit the small pads and the big pads for boost, you collect this much boost. We sort of see that linear tracking from, okay, well, I get more shots on goal. And if I have more shots on goal, then I have more opportunities to score goals, right? And so kind of listening to them iterate over the data and informing their strategy on that data, it kind of opened my eyes to the robustness of that particular data set. I just think all data is cool. So, having the opportunity to kind of take my love of video games and gaming and then kind of bring that together with a side of data and analytics, I feel very fortunate to that, and I've enjoyed it.
That's great. So before we start wrapping things up, I wanted to ask Donald. You tempted us a second ago. We saying you could tell stories. You got any stories of like the early days of data analytics and cognitive science that you think are kind of emblematic of this?
I'll give you a quick one. So when the Kinect was in early development, they were doing a lot of user studies around how people interacted with it. And there was, if anyone's played the Kinect, I forget what it's called, the one that has the obstacle course in it. They were finding there was this perceptual problem where you get like a hurdle and you had to jump over the hurdle, but for some reason just the timing was weird and people could not jump over it. They would always jump a little too soon, and it was just a really messed up game mechanic. So the way they solved it was actually by they created this idea of this turbo boost. So when you jump, you get a little boost when you jump. And what it did was, it was really fun, but it was actually meant to solve this problem, a perceptual problem that happened with the Kinect and people using it.
Nice. Talk about it's almost like design for fun or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Listen, we're just about out of time. I want to thank this incredible panel. You guys are wonderful. Have so many cool insights. I want to kick it back to John. Actually, kick it to John. We hadn't met him before. This is John, everybody, and he's gonna take us out. Thanks again. Over to you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you again to our panel today. For those that are tuning in for the first time, hello, good to meet y'all. My name is John Kefalukas, also known as Fallout in the gaming industry. I've been emceeing and kind of moderating, hosting a bit for the entirety of the Virtual Industry Pro Summit. My man Shaz kicked it off this time around as I had a conflict, but again, big thank you to Greg for moderating and all week long, and last week as well. He's been going above and beyond. This is the Virtual Industry Pro Summit. This is one of our last days. It's hard to think that we're wrapping up here, but the topics have been better and better each day, it seems like. Great discussions today. And of course, now we're going to actually shift a little bit tomorrow to some student-led discussions, which we're really excited about. We get to hear about some students across the U.S. who are doing some very cool things with technology and on the topic of gaming and esports. So that'll be the topic tomorrow, which will be very interesting to jump into. Of course, Microsoft and Games for Change made this all possible. So they're the kind of presenting organizations that ideated this and brought it to life alongside the city of Syracuse and Syracuse University. So thank you to, of course, those three organizations. In addition to our two partners, one, HyperX, for being our presenting sponsor throughout the entirety. Please support HyperX by clicking the link below. And also to Greenlit Content, who does so much, as I got to learn yesterday on an additional panel across the gaming and esports industry, hosting events, productions, you name it, as it relates to gaming and esports. They are providing the production for the entirety of this program, in addition to everything else that they have going on right now, Warzone Wednesdays and many other things. So thank you to Greenlit Content. If you don't know about Greenlit Content, make sure to look them up as well. Of course, the EGF Collegiate Power Series is nearing the grand finals here soon. So it's going to be wrapping up with 41 Division I esports teams as well. Very excited to see how that concludes, as we've had great action and matches across 41 Division I teams over the last 2 weeks. So make sure to check out at official EGF on Twitch, Mixer, YouTube, Facebook, you name it, for the official broadcast for that as well. That's going to be it for today. Again, big thank you to everyone for joining us and watching. Thank you again to our moderators and Greg, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, you guys.
Hera, Hermes, Icarus, Narcissus, Medusa, Ephasus, Ashalalala, sisters, Minerva, Incubus. I love it when you couscous. Aphrodite, Ventus, Hera, Hermes, Icarus,